Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be looking at the 1148 Siege of Damascus. So following the Crusaders arriving in the Holy Lands during the Second Crusade, the Council of Acre was called, and funnily enough it was in Acre, and it was called on the 24th of June 1148. Amongst those attending was the High Court of Jerusalem along with King Conrad and Bishop Otto of Freising, and along with many other petty lords and kings. Now, the council decided that Damascus would be a right target for the Crusading army, as Edessa was now considered essentially out of the question due to the fact that the Crusader army had sustained quite a lot of damage during their trip to the Holy Lands. However, quite a few lords argued that attacking Damascus would be a bad idea due to the fact that Damascus was actually an ally with the Crusader states at the time. And this was due to the fact that other Muslim states had attacked Damascus before, and so they'd allied themselves with the Crusaders. However, no matter what they protested, the city was still decided as the target of the crusade. So during the month of July, the Crusading army gathered around Tiberias with around 50,000 men and marched towards Damascus via the Sea of Galilee to maintain supplies. And on the 23rd of July, the Crusaders arrived in the west section of the city. Now, they chose the west section due to the fact that it had orchards. Now, of course, during a siege, supplies are an incredibly important thing that we must consider during a siege. And these orchards would essentially allow the Crusaders to have at least somewhat decent food source and also water source, as orchards, as we know, require quite a lot of water to grow. However, there was one main problem. The orchards were in the way of the Crusaders, in between the walls and the Crusaders, meaning they'd have to go through it. However, they did not consider this until it was too late. So on Saturday, the 24th of July, the attack began along the banks of the Barada River. Now, the attack around the Barada River was successful and they were able to force the Muslims back. However, when the Crusaders began to march through the orchards, they were slowed down during the attack due to the fact that the Muslims had actually built towers in the orchards to obviously act as defence. And they were essentially being constantly bombarded with lances, arrows, stones, whatever they could throw at the Crusaders, essentially. And this is essentially sort of an early form of guerrilla warfare, if you will, where the Crusaders can't really do anything. So, of course, if you imagine what it was like in Vietnam, you've kind of got an idea of what it would have been similar like during the siege of Damascus. However, the Crusaders were able to make it outside the walls of Damascus, and they immediately began using the wood from the orchards to build siege weapons, which was another reason they chose it. They could build siege weapons with it, they could build defences with it. However, the garrison inside Damascus did actually counterattack and pushed them back into the trees and back to their camp. Now, on the 25th, the Crusaders once again attempted to reach the walls. However, they were not able to, but they did reach the Green Field. Now, this was where the armies of Damascus would train their cavalry, so they were at least able to make some ground with it. And again, on the 26th, however, on the 26th, the defenders launched an attack to the north to repel the Crusaders. And they did suffer heavy casualties during this attack. However, they were able to drive back the Crusaders no matter what. Not only this, but they also received reinforcements from Lebanon, which doubled their supply of arms and men. On the 28th, the Crusaders then decided to move to the eastern side of the city. And although this was less defended, which of course is a benefit when you're attacking a city, there was also less food and water. Now, food and water is obviously a massive important thing. Food, obviously, you need them to maintain energy levels up, but water as well. Clean water basically would prevent diseases from spreading. It would allow for proper sanitation to some degree. But again, it's desert heat in Damascus, so it's not really that good. However, there was one other problem that they faced along with less food and water. The Crusading lords could not decide who would get the city following the attack. And the fact that they hadn't even taken the city and yet they were arguing who would own it really shows you the disunity that the Crusaders were facing at this point during the Second Crusade. And in fact, this would be a sort of theme of disunity would go on throughout all the Crusades, really. Way past the Fourth Crusade, honestly, to all of them. So finally, on the 28th of July, Nur ad-Din and Saif ad-Din arrived at Damascus. Now, the governor of Damascus had actually called for help, and these two had answered and had gone to Damascus to help. Now, Saif ad-Din actually wrote to the Crusaders, urging them to return home. Now, this, of course, was backed up with the fact that his entire army was actually where previously the Crusaders had set up camp, so on the west side instead of the east side. This basically meant that the Crusaders could not return to their original attacking position, meaning they were stuck in the place where there was no food or water, basically. Now, although they could leave the city, they had to basically make up their minds. Do they stay at the city and risk losing their entire army of 50,000 men? But at this point, it had certainly been reduced from multiple attacks. They had suffered heavy casualties. Or would they continue the attack and risk it, or would they just retreat and hopefully make it back? So this actually resulted in many of the local Crusader lords refusing to carry on the siege. This in turn forced the three kings on the crusade to essentially have to abandon it as well, resulting in the entire army moving back. Now, it wasn't actually a peaceful retreat for the Crusaders. The Muslims sent archers and mounted archers to harass the Crusaders all the way back to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, just essentially to rub salt in the wound and make sure that they definitely were retreating, not trying some sort of Mongol feigned retreat tactic here. Now, the failure to take the city would result in a massive distrust between the Christian kingdoms for a whole generation, while Damascus was formally handed to Nur ad-Din in 1154. Now, overall, the Siege of Damascus is a disaster when you put it into context with the rest of the Second Crusade. I mean, a 50,000 strong Crusader army was completely defeated. You know, this is something that completely shatters Christian morale in the sort of outer states, considering the fact that, you know, only a few years prior, the First Crusade had gone incredibly well. However, it has to be obviously considered that the Muslim armies are not actually recorded in size. So for all we know, they could have been very large, they could have been incredibly small. We're not quite certain. So in many ways, you can consider it a Crusade loss, or you could consider it a sort of horrific loss where, you know, they suffered heavy casualties, but so did the Muslims. There are multiple ways you can sort of look at the Siege of Damascus, but overall, this is the thing that finishes the Second Crusade off. They do want to attack other cities, but they just don't have the numbers. Thank you for watching.